Excellencies, Madame Mūrniece, friends and colleagues, I am indeed very glad to see you all here, and usually in the events when it's full house and so many guests, then it's a successful meeting. If you need the headsets, headphones, the event is going to be in Latvian. So should you need interpretation, you can just have the headphones. You can ask for them, right? At the back. Probably you do, but and these headphones, you can ask them to interpret. Or, if not, then someone sitting next to you will interpret for you. I'm so happy to see that this Foreign and Security Policy Yearbook has become now already like Foreign Policy Week de jure recognition, with ambassadors coming over, with debates in the parliament, with foreign and European Union matter discussions, and then opening of the and presentation of the yearbook. I'm so happy to have been in this process for so many years now. As classics say, you know, big and young and old, big and small, read it and read us. So I'm very happy. And this morning I was on television and I said, you know, in the audience, I felt like from them asking the questions that they actually know what we are talking about. So this is how I see that it's something very common already and everyone understands. As common as the weather, which is changing here in Latvia. You never know. That's why it's changing. You never know, for example, when the articles come out. You never know when there's going to be a hardcover copy available of the book. Definitely will be at some point, of course. Please then subscribe to receive one. But those who are modern digital readers, you already can read it because there's a QR code. Those could also, listening to us online, can, you know, read it. And maybe you can also share some comments, some remarks. Also, we can see how thick the snow will be, what will be the authors, how many pages there will be. There are so many authors this year. Many of them are also present here today in the audience, meaning you can ask them the questions directly. And the question also is for how long will the frost and snow stay? And these are like projections of what will happen this year with the recommendations for this year, meaning this is as if predicting somewhat of what is going to happen in foreign policy. And of course, there are also gratitudes to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. First of all, in cooperation with them, we created this yearbook, thanks to the Parliament and the Commission of Foreign Affairs, Madame Mūrniece, in particular, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, and the representatives couldn't be today with us, and very much thank you. Without the fund of Friedrich Ebert, also, I think not only printed, but I think this event we wouldn't be able to organize and so beautifully. Madame Broca and all who implemented this work. Madame Braja, we have now changes in our agenda because Madame Braja is not going to be present. So we're expecting her next time, maybe we'll meet then, but we will have Andžejs Viļumsons, State Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he will be able to also answer one question from the audience, probably. So please, you know, listen attentively and you can ask. Also, we have from the Parliament Commission, Madame Mūrniece. She will also address us, and she's the co-author of the book, obviously, and present here. So, Madame Mūrniece. Thank you, Mr. Bukovskis. I must say, honorable ambassadors and the community of foreign affairs, and in the presentation and opening event of the yearbook. And so, yes, 104th anniversary of recognition of independence de jure, and the whole week of foreign affairs, while or when discussing the foreign affairs, most probably the interest, there's a lot of interest. And this year, more than in previous years, because we have certain urgent matters, and this Foreign Affairs Week is becoming somehow like a decade, 10 days of 10-day period of foreign affairs. But this has been a very active time in the Parliament. We have met foreigners, ambassadors, experts, listening to the debates. We had also some events, and in the debates we could debate the priorities in foreign policy and how we see the interests of Latvia. And as it suggests, the foreign affairs, this time special debates, because we have a new minister and new, so to say, breath in the foreign policy. And I think these debates were heated enough and rather lengthy. And so, yes, looking at the report, we, as if, looked back at everything that we succeeded in last year and looked at what to expect during the next year. And you could say that in the foreign policy, it means that the new year has begun. And yes, I wish to everyone in such case, I wish everyone a happy new year, happy new foreign policy year, talking about the priorities. And I think it's also been heard during the various discussions we had with ambassadors that we have one particular priority we do not argue about. It is security. And it is clear that we are trying to reach 5% of GDP security funding, the budget. And it's not going to be easy, but I think we will find some common solutions. And I must say that most probably next year is going to be as dynamic in foreign policy as the previous year, because the foreign policy situation and environment changes very rapidly, and the articles that have been written a couple of months back, they are actually getting old already. And so they are reflecting a situation as at the moment of them being written. But next, we need to find the solutions all together. And that is what I wish to the Latvia Institute of Foreign Affairs and also to all the community in Latvia. Thank you so much. And yes, this warms our heart, especially because you wish this to Latvia Institute of International Affairs. Thank you to Kārlis, and thank you to the audience for Ministry of Foreign Affairs to be present, to be part of this tradition, which is indeed ongoing for several years already. And Kārlis is correct. This is a week during which we discuss all this, and last week it was again lengthy discussions in the Parliament, and I'm glad to see that the Institute of International Affairs then continues the debate. And as much as I remember, I think they are the ones to create or to promote the discussions about international affairs in public, the Institute. And when I used to be a student, we always were Also, yeah, we were searching for the articles of the Institute of International Affairs when I was a student. But back then, they weren't that frequent maybe, or not that many, but everyone remembers Ārtis Leņķis and the name of the Institute of International Affairs. And so I am glad to see this is continued, and we need new diplomats today, tomorrow. We need them educated, critically thinking. And today, I did look through an electronic version of the yearbook, and I'm positively impressed how large it is, what is the range of topics, recommendations. Yes, maybe some ambassadors will find something not that pleasant. Maybe we'll receive some calls. I think so. But once again, it was not formulated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I want just to disclaim. And that is why I'm glad to see critically thinking researchers who are the ones who promote this critical discussion on how, on what the foreign policy, the international affairs should be like, what we need to do. And those who followed the discussions last week and those who read the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reports, they know that just the priorities are not changing. We have security, state security, economical security, growth, promotion of economical growth, and the security of our community and involvement thereof in international affairs and policy creation. So thank you for all of your contribution in involvement of the society, promotion of the discussion, and once again, thank you to Institute of International Affairs and everyone else, and colleagues and ambassadors, everyone who got involved in ministries and experts of the Council of Foreign Policy. So all the recommendations we've heard while preparing the annual report from the ministry, it was useful, valuable to look at it with different eyes at things that might seem like we take for granted. So thank you very much. There's probably already a question. So you read the articles, as you said previously, of Mr. Leņķis from International Affairs. So you have certain knowledge, well, very broad knowledge of international affairs. If you compare, for example, the 90s and today, what you saw in Yearbook already, are the concerns similar, or what is different? Maybe there's something. I think the central topic is the same. I used to work in Brussels, then the colleagues from different countries, they said, they said they are like one-issue country. We are like one-issue country. And if this one issue is the security, then of course it makes sense. The security is something that contains so many directions and issues. So this is our task, independence and security of our state. What has changed, though, could be that in comparison to the 90s, we are currently seen as a locomotive in terms of the security of the region. So now for Baltic states, for Nordic countries, well, President Trump did speak to our President State Secretaries with the Minister of Foreign Affairs. All the stakeholders interested in peacemaking in Ukraine. I think what has changed is that now, during the last years, we are listened to, and our region specifically is something which forms the EU and NATO security policy. So this is exactly the moment when Cynthia Broka, Deputy Director of Institute of International Affairs, she can then take over the baton and manage the event. I mean, she will also tell about the reason of her presenting, of course, but Mr. Ināra Mūrniece is going to be our first speaker, and also one of the members of the panel, and Mr. Kliģis also, in whichever hat you are, meaning you are also a very welcome guest, and I hope you're going to have a very nice discussion. So thank you once again, colleagues, that you have arrived all here. Thank you, Kārlis. Hello, everyone. Dear friends, dear colleagues, like-minded colleagues, and I'm Deputy Director of Latvia Institute of International Affairs, so I am glad to welcome you in the opening event of a yearbook of foreign policy. So the years go by, and this is the 12th year when we, with our broad panel of experts, write about the vectors, events, and we do come up with also recommendations. So this year there are 20 authors. They analyzed various topics concerning national security, global security challenges, EU matters, competitiveness, and then we are going over also in this region, also talking about Belarus, Ukraine, then also farther to the east and the global south, and sanction policy. All of that was analyzed, and the authors present are indeed, and probably of course here, and are ready to get involved. Now, for the panel discussion today, three honorable experts and policy creators: Eduards Stiprais, the diplomat and representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs; Ināra Mūrniece, politics researcher, and we also know him for Amnesty International member, a long-standing, and he's a special reporter in human rights matters for Belarus. Imants Lieģis, director of the security program in the Institute of International Affairs, but not only that, he's also an advisor to the Minister of Defense, and he, from his perspective, will also share his thoughts on the international affairs. Each year, this yearbook is basically, again, like ending the previous year and introducing the next year. So this goal does not change. But the policy and the situation and the environment is changing, of course. So this year, to a large extent, this analysis is influenced by war in Ukraine and geopolitics in the region. And thus, the structure for our discussion will follow such rule as we will talk regional challenges, and then we will go broader to a larger scope. So, but let us now then, Mr. Stiprais, then, overall, your thoughts about the last year and how are we now stepping in the next year. So let me begin to say foreign policy priorities do not change so much or so frequently or so quickly. So the ideas that were formulated in the Ministry's report to the Parliament, also this year we have three priorities that remain unchanged. This is our security, this is our welfare, economy, and I think that these are the priorities which are so much, they depend on one another, because we can't be talking about the security, and I think also those present, you saw maybe the TV shows and the news or the radio, you understand very well that the security costs something, and we need to earn this money somewhere. So that is why I think that both one of the most important issues for our state is to promote the economic growth, to have this funding, the source of funding. And another thing is also the security of our people, because both first priorities are necessary for insurance of a proper living conditions and security, sense of security, just in general for the community. And just looking back at last year, we can say that all the three priorities, as much as it is possible with the limited resources, is what we achieve. Well, at least the fact that a new war did not start in the nearest vicinity. I mean, okay, that's one good indicator. And I would like to also return to one interesting topic. If we talk about the security of our state, so, for example, we have two instruments, two tools in our country in order to reach this security. Is one, everybody understands automatically, or rather automatically, is the army, so armed forces. Another is our foreign policy, which is our foreign policy or international affairs service. And just to compare, but very practically with a comparison from our lives, so colleagues in the Ministry of Defense and the National Armed Forces, it is firefighters. Whenever there's fire, their task is to actually extinguish the flames. And so those working in foreign affairs, they are the diplomacy firefighters, because our task is not to have the flames in these matters. So there is no possibility even of them to occur. And so in such a way, I'd say that we have been comparatively successful. How do we achieve this? We can do it in two different ways. One is by, well, our practical security measures is what we implement, which is linked to our ability to be able to care for the security of our country. It's like, let's say, our armed forces, size of it, or maybe equipment is not sufficient, but then it means that our security alliances are ever more important, and the interest of our allies and ability of our allies to come to our help in some decisive moments. And I think that in this way also it's been a successful year last year with NATO summit in Washington, making very important decisions specifically for us, both on the strengthening of the presence of allied forces in the region and in Latvia specifically, and also regarding improvement of our improvement of capabilities of our forces. And in this very same topic falls a subtopic of potential threat decrease in such a way that the closest aggressor state to us, i.e. Russia, for them not to be as well, for them not to be strong and to be deterred from the desire to invade. And here, as cynical as it does sound, well, our friends from Ukraine do suffer for this cause. So our task then is to support them in their freedom fight, in their fight for independence with the invaders. It is. And the fact that Latvia is among the states which proportionately have given the most support, or one of the biggest support in overall resilience capabilities of Latvia and directly to armed forces of Ukraine, it goes to show that we do understand and we do everything that is necessary. And the ceremony this morning, also with additional equipment transferred to Ukrainian armed forces, this is one of the examples we see. This is how it happens, that we are doing this and we are committed. And the second large block is, well, many would then doubt, and rightfully so, and it's the question to introduce or establish a new world order. Well, let's say, for Latvia being a comparatively smaller state, not in terms of territory, but in terms of population, for us, it is so important for the basis of our treaties and agreements is stable. And the same goes if we, for example, if we did return to the environment or we renounce the laws, then what kind of chaos would begin on the streets? Or maybe some order, but such order which we would probably not like, most of us. And the same is with international affairs. There are legal acts, and they are the ones or rules which protect those who are not that strong at any given moment. And the preservation of such order or the necessity to reform it, for it to become more efficient, is something that we aspire to achieve. That is why Latvia also is claiming the candidacy in June. There is going to be election in UN Security Council. So there could be different opinions on how significant, but still the principle that we are, so it's always better, as colleagues say, always better to be at the table when there are discussions, and we want to be. And we are not going to be alone. There's going to be our friends, our allies, yes, probably also enemies, some with veto rights, unfortunately, but we will still have an impact on the agenda and the impact in exactly such a way as necessary for us. That is why we've done Andžejs Viļumsons, our colleague, and he 24/7, 7 days a week, he worked and achieved that we have received a lot of supporters from, including exotic countries, for us to be voted in, and we're not going to be, once again, a one-issue state, as said, or maybe we have been, but still, I would not say that it's not a significant issue. It is, but we have shown that we have a capability to discuss, to go into the topic deeper about the issues of the, I don't know, Latin American states, or maybe in the matters of very island countries or exotic countries. Yes, well, we heard a lot of positivity, then maybe you would not agree, but Let us return to one of your theses now on the role of Ukraine in our security and in the context of the regional security, also very much then based on the matter of international rule of law. And Latvia has been one of the leading protectors of such rule of law, and also protecting Ukraine and supporting, but not always. It's been, they have maybe not described it as positively. And for example, Madame Mūrniece in her article writes about some problems in the capabilities of cooperation, and it's been a challenge in the previous year, and what we need to do in order to only promote such cooperation and strengthening of the community. And now, one of the articles in the yearbook, author Elizabete Vizunova, greetings to you, and Rebecca Zvirbula, and one of the recommendations by the authors were to continue to improve some action plans. So my question then, very briefly, is to what extent do we have this analysis of worst-case scenarios, and how much of that exists in the ministry, and what, in the end, if we were not successful to convince a broader range of allies that we only need Ukraine to win on Ukrainian terms? Maybe briefly. I mean, I can't do it briefly. It's half an hour. What do we understand with the victory of Ukraine? In this room, too, there might be different opinions. I'd say we always bear in mind the worst case scenario, the possibility thereof, but what we do at the same time, and I agree, Mr. Imansliedis would then tell you more what happens maybe in some other institution, maybe down the street from us. But let's say we have to take very seriously strengthening of our security capabilities, because this might be the last chance. Hopefully we never experience, but we need to be ready. We need to be preparing, because we hear the discussions on the necessity of budget for defense, and we need to spend it as efficiently as possible, which is, once again, it is a top priority. We need to just remain dwelling on this discussion. We need practical solutions and activity. Concerning the foreign policy, let's say the first thing we work on is contact with the new administration of the United States. We need to strengthen this contact where it's been already established and successfully, and keeping it such. It would not solve everything, but we are continuing working with our allies and other stakeholders here in Europe. I would say the situation is developing very quickly, at times so unpredictable that sometimes something we plan tomorrow may not come true. I have been one of the persons also contributing to the report, the annual report, and I'd say I am critical about the 10 days that got mentioned, that now, since coming to the office of the new administration, I mean, basically this report is even not topical anymore after its issue very quickly. We have so many interesting developments since the administration coming into power, and as it says in an ancient legend, so to say, for you to live in interesting times. Okay, maybe we will return to the discussions also about these matters, and I will once again advise our audience you actually are able to send in some questions. You've scanned the code probably, or you can use the Slido referral. Now, let's see about the foreign policy and history. What do you believe, what do you think about the last year in foreign policy and maybe broader aggression of Russia in Ukraine? And one of the authors also mentioning Belarus and several theses and recommendations about it, how to and what to prepare for, and what would be a proactive activity in analyzing the events in Belarus. So where we are and what is the situation in Belarus currently, and what are the how can Latvia then impact this, or maybe our community? So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I am honored to be in such a panel, so I can speak more freely. I do not work in state administration. I can mention Trump, Greenland, and many other things. Some of you are probably afraid to mention this. But I think what's going on, the order, the rules international, with Trump coming to power, it is endangered. I mean, for liability in terms of the responsibility of Lukashenko and others, because in the Congress in US there are discussions on sanctions and maybe also cooperation with International Criminal Trial as the institute, and for deportation, for example, of children from Ukraine by Russia. Those working on promotion of this investigation, actually, they are going to be prosecuted by the US or sanctioned. Our neighbors, Lithuanians, also have transferred the case to the International Criminal Trial on the deportations of crimes against humanity and crimes of Lukashenko. Now, once again, they may be facing some persecution. If we look more broadly on human rights, I'd say it's a gloomy picture. For example, reproductive health of women, family planning funding, and what are they saying now? The Netherlands would say they will mobilize the allies to fill in for this field, but nobody is doing that. It didn't happen. So, for example, stopping foreign aid, it's a catastrophe for a lot of the world, and it is especially concerning Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians. We already hear about projects being terminated. Belarusian diaspora receives, thank God, a lot of funding from European sources. In Brussels, there's European Endowment for Democracy, such institution, which uses both EU and member state funding to fund certain projects. They said that approximately 2/3 of all the Belarusian diaspora funding comes from EU, so it's not that much in danger because of this. But I've heard that other areas then are indeed endangered, and then we have to look how to fill in this what now the US would withdraw from. And so now, regarding Russia and Belarus, what is the state of the US against Russia and Belarus? The signals are not good. So there are certain member states of the EU. There is one, Hungary. But now we have a second one already, Slovakia. Slovakia just adopted, I mean, they received new ambassador, they are cooperating in culture, now signing certain agreements. What is going on with Austria? What will happen with the unity of Europe regarding the threats from the East? And now, in terms of trade with the US, are we going to be able to react as a single entity? I doubt. But talking about a rule-based international order with Trump in power, it's difficult, because the observers say that this is going to be a year of chaos. Trump has 4 years. No, he's got 1, but next election cycle then begins and he wants to create as much chaos as possible. Are we even prepared for it? I am afraid the European Union in general is not ready for it. We are not ready to. It was difficult for us to even imagine. Who could have said we are going to be talking about Greenland 2 months ago? Could you have predicted we would be talking about it? Well, if we talk about the future. I mean, yes, Belarus, Lukashenko elections. In such context, I wanted to ask then about the community in Belarus and what is the situation? How or what does it reflect well, at all, or how the opinion of the people from Belarus and their direction towards the West, towards Europe? Well, it's not election, it's a special election operation. In Belarus, they have destroyed the civil society. There are certain people or activists who have been released from prison and they're trying to do something, but it's very small numbers and they're rather silent overall. The diaspora of Belarusians is well structured, organized, and very professionally they work in the field of human rights and in various mechanisms, and they understand international law and are able to lobby their interests and analyze the situation. And as I said also, as I mentioned, they are not that dependent on the aid from the United States of America. But they had recently 2 major events. First is human rights matters in Belarus. In EU, for the first time, they are addressing it so much, this topic, and it was a very successful event. But the second one was, and it clearly, like before so-called elections on the 26th of January, they wanted a message from institutions of EU and America that this is not a legitimate election. So, and what happens next? They don't have a long-term plan. There are strategies, they can't name them. They are also expecting something, and they can't say what is going on with peace talks, with Trump, and whether Belarus, how the Belarusian situation is going to be impacted. Are there going to be new opportunities or new threats from the peace talks that might happen? They don't know. But as I said, they are well organized, and I think they are united, and once again we'll say their situation with funding is not as difficult. And what is going to happen then within UN? just in 2 words, I will say I am now reporting on human rights situation. This title has been present for, I think, 12 years. And then there's a tradition of writing the reports. And there's a new structure called Independent Expert Group, which comes up with the first reports in March. And they should be focused on the responsibility for the crimes in Belarus, which proposes new discussions within UN about Belarus, about holding liable. So the question is whether the America is going to support. Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know exactly. And maybe at some point maybe we'll see good decisions made. But Mr. Liedis, then, your task is not an easy one. The regulatory basis, such challenges, conventional warfare in the region. So where we've been and what has year 2024 been and what are the concerns now going into 2025 and everything else that was said before, and of course your predictions then for, please share your knowledge, your opinion with the audience and maybe something new. Thank you once again for invitation. You know, we heard that the priorities has not changed, which I can agree. The circumstances have impacted the way how we formed our foreign policy, security policy. But in my opinion, last year there were 2 major factors. One first is elections in many places. And if we look at, for example, elections, of course, for Latvia, strategically most important partner is the USA, and we were all during this year anticipating the results of the elections. The positive news is that in November we already knew very clearly what the new administration will be, and that is why we expected then the January when the new president is inaugurated. Of course, thus there was also the unknown throughout the last year how to form your strategy, and I think that ever more clear it becomes that in any case, with any result of the elections in the USA, it was clear that for Europe, regarding the security and defense of our region, we will have to do more. It's no news, nothing new. For quite a time since founding of NATO, we saw the positive results from President Trump's first presidency, when at that time it was maybe 7 or I think less states that devoted 2% of GDP to defense. So last year already it was 23 countries exceeding the 2% of GDP for defense. We have seen positive results from previous presidency of President Trump. So certainly at the same time, with these decisions within NATO and what they have been over the course of last years, that we need to, especially in our region, to improve our capabilities, both us and our allies, and the direction has been definitely positive. We can also conclude that for us and for the allies together, we need to do more to ensure that there is no attack no attack from part of Russia to a NATO member state. So if we look at, once again, defense, then political agreement, we heard also on Thursday in the debates that both the opposition and the position, they do all understand that we need to have more funding for defense, definitely. But US elections was not the only thing that impacted global situation and situation in Europe. As we saw in France, unexpected and extraordinary elections, and the new government. In a way, we need to understand that both France and the UK were last year, there also were elections. These are the nuclear states, which is significant globally and in the context of NATO. So it was important for us to see how in the UK their attitude towards Europe changes with their government changing, and in France how, even though the instability of the government still exists, and it's clear that we did count on the presence of Macron in 2027 in any way. So I think that this France role in protection and security of Europe is significant. So I think this year, and this is also happening, is that we're trying to keep the US involved in the security and defending of Europe. It is too early to predict whether we're going to be successful. I don't think NATO, I said I don't think that the US exits NATO, but at the same time, in informal European Union government summit in Brussels, where these discussions are also taking place, specifically on the necessity for Europe itself to devote more to security, and also with the Prime Minister of the UK. I think this is already showing how significant it is. And plus, this summit showed how quickly the Europe could react to new circumstances with new presidents and new administration in power in Washington, D.C. So, yes, but the amount of, or an array of threats is rather wide. Cyber security concerns and attacks, we hear about it every day. And so on Slido, I see one question. So once again, reminding that if you're not present, you can also ask questions. And the question then is about the challenges for international court. So Trump's addressing, and we talked about Belarus and Russia in this context, but targeting this institution, then the question is how much Trump's targeting the court is also about the order on the Prime Minister in Israel. So what does it mean to us as a small country? Anyone? Then the floor is open for you to respond. Well, it's got deeper roots. America they did not want for American soldiers to be prosecuted for conduct in Iraq and elsewhere. they did not want to cooperate with the court, and they were also weakening it. And of course, Trump's administration will have close ties with Netanyahu. Definitely, they will try to protect him from being prosecuted. But still, I don't see that this is just the fate of this court because of the situation in Israel. I think it's broader context. I think this is one of many elements in this system. We can talk about also others, like World Trade Organization, also threatened. As Latvian diplomats said, well, maybe it doesn't make any sense. They will very soon actually, there will be no, they will eliminate this authority. But I think this threat then is broader. It is not directly linked to the Middle East. And I think that the support to what's going on there, of course, it's going to impact Europe. Anyone else want to? Yeah, well, I can only agree. In this case, the arrest order for Netanyahu is it is only promoting, acts like a catalyst. So now maybe representatives from embassies, anywhere else, any questions, and if you have read the articles. I am Sergejs Potapkins, a researcher of Institute of International Affairs. I wrote also the article on Global South in the Yearbook. That is why I have a question about that, about China. Can I ask for your commentary on our relations with China? Is it a threat or as a competitor? Any other questions maybe we'll gather? Or maybe a comment? Okay, well, maybe just let's go one by one. UN Security Council is okay, we'll continue with that. So we don't see China as a direct threat currently. There are colleagues who once compared that if we look at, for example, behavior of Russia, now it's like a tornado, like a hurricane. It just comes, but it would then go, it would finish. But if we look at China, it's like some global shift. It's like global warming, which will hit us anyways, will impact us anyways. Not necessarily maybe as quickly or as dynamically, but so this is the concern about China. That is why it is really important to do all we are able to reduce our vulnerability against some possible activities, some hostile actions of China in the future. That might be. We already see, for example, some activities, and I mean, we can argue then whether we should sanction, not sanction certain cyber attacks. In the context of cyber attacks, we see that China uses, and once again, it's a question actually, whether they are adopting their foreign policy to certain economic events inside. So they're absolutely imbalanced economy or overproduction crisis now. Basically, they're trying to take over the markets in the world by dumping the prices in so many sectors of products. And then once again, one thing is how it impacts us directly. Latvia is not the biggest producer of industrial goods. Well, we are not directly competing with China, but what China is doing now is China is destroying the possibilities of economic growth for many third world countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, because essentially Chinese, with massive dumping of prices policy, are creating such conditions, just the industrial production in certain countries, even launching it, it's not feasible. They're forced and pressed. They are not allowed to develop and create some added value. I think that here, for global security, it's a larger risk than direct threats for us, I don't know, even military. So India and Pacific region, then China role. Two comments on China and how we can be impacted. Which is the most popular country in Belarus, according to survey? It's China. It's surprising, but why? Belarus is an important corridor into Europe for China, and they are investing very much in the knowledge of Chinese language in Belarus, and the official rhetoric is always, and I think that this is one of the ways how Lukashenko is maneuvering between Russia and the West, and that China is going to be a new big friend. But one of the ministers in Poland then told me that they sent the Minister of Foreign Affairs to China to be talking about the pressure on Belarus to stop the migration. Otherwise, the Poles will stop transit of cargo, and they believe it had certain impact when they asked this. It's actually very difficult to analyze whether it really was, but all I'm saying with this is that China can so indirectly impact Belarus. Another thing is that China role in human rights globally. Our diplomats, other diplomats said that more than 30 diplomats are in Geneva from China working on human rights. They go to various committees, the task forces are very active there. China is the second largest donor for human rights activities within UN. And what is the attitude of China towards human rights? Sovereignty, not getting involved in some internal affairs of the country. So now they're actually directing this attitude also in Africa very actively. If China becomes one of the bigger players and the US role reduces in UN, then which approach we will have in the world? Globally, I'm afraid the Chinese one. And maybe let's not speak of all the Europe, but we are just going to be very, very small in the UN, and then China will be major. Doesn't seem very bright for our value system. Mr. Liedis, well, concerning the China as a threat, let us remember that China is a challenge more so than a threat to NATO, as expressed. The biggest threat to NATO is Russia. Once again, this notion is strengthened in various documents. From the perspective of threats, there is currently in our region a cyber warfare, and not only in our region, in many NATO member states. There are acts of sabotage, cyber attacks, attacks to critical infrastructure in the sea, and attacks and constant attempts to test. Also in our region, the NATO airspace, and this is if we talk about the threat. And I think that it is important to look at both China's relations with the US, because from the perspective of Washington, then it's clear that China is the priority number one in international policy. Europe Europe's importance diminishes, but that's again nothing new. During Obama presidency, it was already expressed. There was like it pivoted essentially, so it's again nothing new, and with that we just need to take it into consideration. Thinking about let's just again remember that. So this is then the focus on India and Pacific region for the US. And secondly, we need to observe what is going on with China's relationship with Russia. We see that between the leaders of the countries, of the mentioned countries, there's a positive dynamic going on. Putin with Xi, they have met more than 40 times. Then we're only thinking how harmonized their activities are. Russian, for example, activities in Europe and maybe China's activities against Taiwan. But at the same time, it is clear that China, together with Iran and North Korea and Russia, it's like, well, like a bloc. Once again, we need to take them into account. And at the same time, we need to remember that China has as if rather positive role when Putin threatened to use nuclear weapons in the warfare in Ukraine, against Ukraine. So it's clear that we need to be very, pay much attention to what are the developments in their relationship. So the question is whether we will have a common attitude from Europe and Europe with the US against China. We also see that there are nuances that differentiate various European countries in their relationship, in European country relationships with China. In one of the questions, you mentioned, for example, the necessity to cooperate Europe and America within NATO, but there, does it, like, their attitude towards Canada now? We have actually publication of ambassador. He would be able to then clarify better, but definitely these steps now by President Trump during the last days, on one hand, and in my article I said we are expecting unpredictability, but in all honesty, Trump was warning about such steps, and it's clear that Canada also did respond, and I think that and then Europe will also be ready to respond. However, definitely it will be difficult to meaning not take into consideration these relationships and in the context of NATO. But if we look back into the past, we have had also trade wars between the US and allies of Europe. Well, various instances and several mentioned then, and all these tensions, and even though they were present then, France renewed its presence in military planning in NATO. So actually, it's like unpredictability, basically. Of course, it reduces the level of trust. Nevertheless, until now, it's not been fatal, and, well, I rely on it not being like that in the future, too. We are expecting elections, I think, at the beginning of summer then, Mr. Ambassador. Security Council of UN was mentioned several times, and I wanted to share on this. Latvia is going to be voted in the second as a non-permanent member. Well, I mean, there are good chances for Baltic states, for eastern flank of NATO, for Europe. It's a big event. So since 2008 and Russia invading Georgia, we have agreed that always in the Security Council there has to be at least one country representing this region. It was done by Lithuanians, Estonians, Poles, Swedes and Norwegians, then it's us, and then Finland to follow. It is very important for us. At this table, there is someone like constantly representing our interests, defending our interests, and at this very moment, it is so important. I want to stress, underscore, we are not going to be alone there. We're going to be together with France, Denmark, Greece, 4 countries from EU plus the UK. It's like 1/3 of the 15, block of 15, who are very close allies. Talking about the US, we are using a different metaphor than Eduards did. Often, our military colleagues then are like mercenary optimists, but I think I'm realist. President Trump, I think, is not going to withdraw from NATO. He's a businessman. He knows very well that UN provides about $3 billion to New York City budget every year, and it's a significant support for the economy of a municipality. And our Estonian colleagues were in Security Council during the previous Trump administration, and back then too it was difficult. There was dilemma. But Estonians did manage rather brilliantly. And regarding the court, the International Criminal Court, then, is that we need to consider the USA has never been a member. So far, the cooperation with the International Criminal Court has not been terminated ever. So there was an address in the Security Council and reporting on the events in Myanmar and what are we doing regarding Russia and other regions in Sudan. So, of course, there are concerns, there are certain risks, but this institution continues their work. That is why I think that these questions are going to be in the agenda. So since Satis Lēņš times, what has changed? Thanks to the candidacy of Latvia, then they are for the first time going to be present so much and globally. And the interest towards Latvia then increases. And for the first time, several ambassadors were accredited in Latvia for the first time from various regions, and their governments are sending their representatives to find out more. What is Latvia? What is our what are our values? And I think we can judge this to be a positive for both our economy and also for being together with our allies and friends. Absolutely, and thank you very much. Thank you for your work in all of this process, and to all the colleagues from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is an absolutely success for all of it to happen and to be in these positions and really to represent your values and to bring your message. But with this and on this positive and beautiful note, colleagues, experts, what is your view? What would you say now to the diplomats how to keep this being heard, being listened to. First of all, once again, congratulations. There will be vote. Let's hope it will be then beneficial to us. But I want to return to what was said by the State Secretary Andžejs Viļumsons. This is the time of yield for the Baltic states. We see that in the new composition of the Commission, there is not only Estonia, the highest representative in international affairs, but we have a Lithuanian who is the Commissioner for Security. Thirdly, Kārlis Bukovskis, still very impactful in the Commission. So it all goes to show that since the times of Mr. Lange, we have progressed. Once again. Also, greetings to Art is probably listening to us. Well, I believe it is great. We are going to the Security Council in UN, and how our horizon broadens. We're going to have new friends, new allies. It is absolutely important. It shows our maturity in foreign policy, and I congratulate everyone involved. I think still one of our major focus points will be the security of Europe, NATO, and also, especially with the Nordic countries and Poland. I do see it, considering the tendencies in certain member states of the EU and also different views on the threats to the security which are present, for example, in the southern Europe. Interesting. Sweden has the least, they spend the least, they spend the least to security in Europe, but Italy and Spain, and then, and some, yeah, in Greece it's the largest proportion, yes, share. Okay, and it all, yes, because they're close to Turkey, okay. I mean, what I wish is, at the same time, with accentuating a global affairs, especially in this direction, and Poland and Nordic states, Poland, for example, very significant partner for us, similarly to how it is ongoing also in the Security Council in the UN. But I think we are also always have to be thinking about this broader context. After June, what will change then in your everyday life? It is difficult to wish, you know, I mean, for myself something, yes, I want everything, but what I would want, and I think I would wish, I would ask for those listening to us, looking at us, and also all this international affairs community, and it was really very well worded. At the second part of this year and at the beginning of next year, when our work starts in the Security Council, we will need all of your support. We will need it extremely so. The Council of International Affairs, we are not that many in the service, and we need all the support possible. Then the amount of work will be as big as our colleagues from France, from the UK, and from elsewhere, from what they did. So without such support, it will be extremely difficult. So I would definitely love to see your support. Any last questions before we close the section of Q&A? Thank you, experts. And then from me, project coordination work then. Of course, we continue that, and thank you to all the authors who got involved, editors, LIIA Elizabeth Balode, Santa Pelše, and all the other colleagues that are mentioned for your patience and for your cooperation with the Institute of International Affairs. And of course, then, this is a significant work for the region, for Latvia, and we can now enjoy in this event. So, project manager from Friedrich Ebert Fund also to say a couple of words. Dear audience, I represent the regional office of Friedrich Ebert Fund. So 2024 has been a year of challenges and changes, but Latvia showed its efficiency in the international scene. Friedrich Ebert Fund is always directed towards and supports democratic societies. This event is an important platform to raise awareness of the region concerns and issues and challenges, and also to link the experts and the community. And together, we can strengthen the security of Latvia and Europe. We see that global instability increases. However, the clear strategy of our state and cooperation between the allies then mobilizes us for responsible activity. This yearbook is not only a deeper analysis on last year, but this will also help us prepare for an ever-changing situation globally. We take pride in the achievements, but also setting an example for the world, the achievements of Latvia. So the movie of Mr. Zilbalodis shows that these achievements are as important as our economic growth. I am thus thankful to all the authors and experts who contributed to this yearbook, and especially Cynthia Broka for this significant work. Without you, this event wouldn't be possible. Your work helps to create strategically thinking and informed society, which is the strongest foundation of our country. Our future is our common responsibility. Let us continue working, analyzing, and acting. Thank you. And let us meet then in the next formats. Thank you, Kristaps. Thank you to Friedrich Ebert Fund and the authors and all the audience, all the present in the audience, and those who observed us, who watched us online. Experts panel. Now there's a coffee break, and all the authors. Now let us have a family photo, and we'll be here for a while then. Thank you.